Welcome everyone to episode 8 of our What If interview series, where we discuss and share knowledge on customer experience, digital transformation, and how to better serve customers via digital channels. My name is Luke Stamper, and I'm the Sales and Marketing Executive for Mando. We're a digital agency committed to simplifying digital experiences for everyone. We work within regulated industries with companies like utilities and financial services companies, focusing on helping our customers to do those tasks they don't really want to do. So we don't really all wake up on a Saturday morning raring to go to pay our water bill or submit an insurance claim. We make these experiences easier, giving customers time back to do more exciting things. Just to let you all know that we have my Mando colleague Sarah on the call with us too. Sarah will be helping with logistics throughout the call and monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the course of today's webinar, please be sure to send them in and Sarah will ask them at the end of the discussion. We'll be chatting for around 20 minutes, so if you have any questions, please just send them in and we'll move on to them at the end. So today we're discussing what if your website couldn't cope with customer demand in a major incident with Simon Green, CTO from the cloud hosting consultancy Whyhive. For those of you on the call who are unaware of Whyhive, they're a forward-thinking cloud hosting and consultancy services company with deep technical expertise and digital industry understanding, helping their customers to solve the technology challenges that come from operating in a digital age with cloud technology. Mando and Whyhive are strategic partners, and we've been working together over the last 3 years to ensure that our clients' digital estates are securely hosted and their cloud hosting solution is tailored specifically to their business requirements, providing them with the assurance that their websites have the ability to serve vast numbers of customer traffic simultaneously. I can breathe now. So,
good
with that said, good morning, Simon. How are you?
All good, thanks. All good.
Good. Can you just give us a little introduction to yourself and Whyhive, sure, and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I've been involved in the web hosting side of the internet for about 20 years, working either on my own businesses or for other people. My career proper sort of started out in the digital agency side, looking after IT and also the web hosting requirements for that business, a company called Blue Halo. And for the last 10 years, I've been running Whyhive along with my fantastic colleagues. Whyhive helps people who want to solve a problem using online technologies of all sorts. We've got a variety of specialists working with us for the major cloud platforms, as well as quite a broad skilled support team that can help with just about any day-to-day issues that come up from using those environments. Recently, we've been working closely with Microsoft to help them share and educate on the possibilities of a modern cloud environment.
Great. Thank you very much for that. So the way in which we normally run the webinars is we discuss things, how they used to be, how things have changed, and how things are in the modern day, and what the future of specific solutions and technologies are. So with that in mind, when it comes to hosting digital solutions like websites, how did things used to be?
We've definitely been through 3 sort of distinct eras when it comes to web hosting. It started out with buying your own physical servers, hooking them up to connectivity at either your premises or in a data center and running your sites from there. It wasn't too dissimilar really to the way you might have gone and bought, computers and so on. But rather than getting PCs and putting Windows on them and doing your work on them, you're buying servers, putting Windows or Linux on them, and putting websites on them. And that was pretty much the norm until sort of 2005, 2007-ish. We've also had a rather long ongoing phase where rather than using dedicated hardware, you can use a virtual server on someone else's hardware or multiple virtual servers on your own hardware. This started out as a cost-saving route, but the other benefits, the logistical and operational benefits that come from that, turned it into the de facto approach for everything really, from tiny workloads up to the most massive workloads you can imagine. And that's simply because it gave a lot of operational benefits and flexibility that you don't have when you're running on physical tin that you own. And today we're in a code-defined era. What that means is you describe what you want your hosting environment to look like in code, and then input that into an orchestration platform, which takes care of ensuring the environment that you want exists. So I want to have these things, tell the system you want to have it, and it makes it be. That could be on-prem, but almost always it's done on the hyperscale cloud platforms like Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform, and so on. You can also do cross-cloud and cross-on-prem to on-cloud in a hybrid, but the important thing is you no longer have to go out and specifically spec individual servers and things like that.
Okay, so you mentioned a range of options there in terms of hosting. How do you identify what is the best solution for a company's requirements?
So it's about picking the right tool for the job. When we're approaching an engagement like that, we do it in 4 phases. We'll start out talking strategy with C-suite or similar, translating what your business goals for the next X many years are into a strategy that makes sense in an IT environment. Then we will go on a discovery path and find all of the skeletons, kick the tires, make sure there's nothing in there that's going to be a surprise when we start designing an environment. Go and figure out, forewarned is forearmed, basically. Then we'll, off the back of that, build a design with the knowledge we now have to deliver on that strategy. And then we will build from that design as the final step. So it's very much the more effort you put into the upfront work, the strategic side and the design side, the greater the value you will get out of the build, because it will be more aligned to your strategic aims. Also, part of the strategy at the start is making sure that you have those aims in the first place and you aren't just trying to solve a simple problem. But we approach things in a very technology agnostic way. We will only design what we believe to be the right solution for your problem, not this is what we want to sell and this is how we can shoehorn that into your business.
Okay, great. So in your personal experience, having worked in the hosting realm for quite some time, what would you say are the most significant changes to the way in which people are hosting their digital estates?
I guess it depends on sort of the time period, really. I mean, if you compare to, say, 5 years ago, really the mass adoption of the hypercloud environments has just made the traditional hosting sector irrelevant now. People used to spend a lot of time going from website to website, comparing server specs, bandwidth, minutiae of technical specifications, whereas now those platforms underneath they're all much of a muchness. They all do the same thing. There is certain tools that only exist on one rather than another, but the basic underlying platforms can all deliver the same thing. Instead, the value comes from the teams that you're working with and the engagement you have with the providers of those platforms in the first place. So how aligned are your development team and your infrastructure team? How aligned are your infrastructure team and the teams who are running these platforms? So in the case of us, for example, it would be how aligned are Mando and Wirehive and how aligned are Wirehive and Microsoft, to pick an example. That's way more important to a successful project than what's the specific server underneath.
Okay. So making that transition, moving to cloud hosting, sounds like a significant step. Is it a complicated process?
Yes, I think is the short answer.
Short.
There's it's not it's not something that just automatically happens because you have chosen, we're going to go with Microsoft Azure. You can just lift and shift everything you have and move it to one of the cloud platforms. But that is not the right approach, and you are leaving value on the table by doing that. What you should be doing is bringing in experts, if you don't already have them in-house, who understand the value that can be got from these platforms and help you align what your business goals are to those things that you didn't realize existed. There is more to successful adoption of Microsoft Azure or Microsoft Office 365 or things like that than we want to move our email. You know, there are whole work patterns and ways of working that you might have never considered before. And the same applies to development. There are there are tools and approaches that developers have that available to them in their hyperscale clouds that they may have never encountered before, whole different ways of working.
Great. I think one of the things that I find most fascinating about cloud hosting, and it's something that's particularly pertinent to our customers, is that hosting solutions in the cloud, by hosting solutions in the cloud, you're able to ensure that your website can scale to meet the demand of customers. So, for example, one of our customers experienced a huge spike in traffic as a result of a storm in 2019, and their website comfortably dealt with that spike in traffic without any interruptions in service for the end customer. The website efficiently handled, I think it was a 600% increase in visits across desktop, mobile, and tablet, and without any downtime being experienced. How does cloud hosting support that scalability?
Well, it's probably easier to think first about how a traditional on-prem environment doesn't support scalability. If you think of a web hosting environment a bit like a major arterial road, a big dual carriageway or a motorway or something like that, you have to have capacity on that road for the peak traffic that it's going to receive. 95% of the day, that capacity is going to waste. And so you've used all that land, you've put all that cost into building that road, but it's only been used for that 5% window of the day. If you don't do that, if you go the other way, if you accommodate for the average traffic or just a small amount of traffic, then when you do have those peaks, people can't get down the road. It's not going to work. People are going to have a bad time, a bad experience. You're going to get grumpy letters to the council, etc. The hypercloud approach is a hypothetical road that just changes shape and lanes depending on the time of the day, the day of the week, the number of cars that are going down it. Any metric really that you can derive from the flow of traffic through your website can be used to reshape the environment dynamically to accommodate that traffic. You could have, to run with the road analogy, you could have a motorway that drops down to a single lane at 3 a.m. between Sunday and Monday, but then at 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday opens up for rush hour to a 5-lane, behemoth of a road, and then collapses back down again. And you're not wasting all of that cost and opportunity while you're not using it. And the reason for that is because you're making use of economy of scale. The hyperclouds have got enormous data centers full of servers where they will have more capacity than they require for a particular point in time, but that allows everyone in there to make use of that capacity in waves and in surges in a software defined way, in a code defined way, rather than committed, this is the amount of resource that I require, please.
Mm-hmm. And does that scalability and surge in traffic, does that come with a massive price tag for the likes of an insurance company or an energy provider?
It can do, but that's not always the case. It doesn't have to. If you do it wrong, it's incredibly expensive. If you do it right, in an absolute perfect ideal world, it should be a linear scale between the visitors coming to your website and the cost that you're paying. In a hypothetical, perfectly defined cloud environment, every visit should cost you a known amount of cost of sale, and that will scale in a perfect straight line. The reality is somewhere in between. In the most common environments, you'll define a static baseline cost that you're happy for it to run at, and you'll agree steps of cost at different levels of traffic that it will surge up and down through. And then perhaps you might also agree a ceiling where you don't ever want to go any higher. And that will depend on what you're delivering to your customers. If you are an e-commerce site, you probably don't want to ever have a ceiling, because what you're doing is you're shutting your front door to potential customers. But if you are, say, a local authority, a council, you've got a fixed budget to deliver this project, and you need to make sure that it fits within it. And so you would have a ceiling of, we don't ever want to spend more than this much per month, for example. But let's get the benefits of allowing it to reduce down rather than scale up infinitely.
Does the scalability of a website or a digital estate have a limit? Is there a point where traffic becomes overwhelming, even for the most scalable of solutions?
Realistically, no. The only limit is how much budget you are prepared to put towards it. In a well-architected world, as I said, your hosting cost should be a cost of scale, not an overhead, though. a cost of sale, sorry, not an overhead. And so it should scale appropriately with revenue. But you have challenges that arise from different scales of growth. You will find bottlenecks appearing in different areas, and the way to identify those in advance and work around them or fix them, or just get rid of them entirely, is by testing. If you don't test your environment up to the largest scale that you can imagine trying to come to it, you have no way of knowing in advance whether or not it's going to work or how much it's going to cost you. So regular testing on a well-defined test plan against an environment allows you to pick up all of that stuff beforehand and define your limits and know your limitations as well in your environment. But hypothetically, no, there is, you could build a website that will scale, essentially infinitely, or certainly within the means that matter, right?
So you mentioned cost there. So given that most companies are now turning to cloud services like Microsoft Azure to host their digital estates, can we unpack the costs of that a little bit? Is there like a t-shirt price structure, or can companies be more specific about how they want to host their solutions and tailor it to their requirements?
So certainly in our approach, companies should always be incredibly specific about how they want to tailor it. There is an element of reusability in how you approach design. So the strategies you take when you are coming up with the design for something, or there are certain transplantable strategies that work with different sectors and different businesses. But the reality is that every business's requirements have subtle variations in them. That might be your brand guidelines, or your regulatory environment that you work within, or it could be your budgets. My example I gave of e-commerce versus a local authority, they're going to have very different approaches to cost of sale and OPEX. And so you have to take all of those requirements into consideration. There is no one size fits all approach. If you do find someone offering you a one size fits all approach, what you're actually looking at is a one size fits nobody approach, and you're taking the penalty of that as a consequence. Really, you're going to be in a suboptimal situation. It is always worth putting the effort in to strategy and design beforehand to tailor the environment to your requirements.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't really sound like a process rather that's easily navigated unless you're an expert. What is the importance of tailoring the cloud solution specific to your business requirements with experts such as yourself?
Yeah, well, the importance of, I guess, is as I described. If you don't tailor it, or you're using people who don't know what they're doing with it, I guess the worst case situation is you will end up with the additional cost that comes from a large scale cloud environment, but none of the benefits, none of the scaling. You'll be running an on-prem type environment, simply lifted and shifted into the cloud. So you'll still have the burdens of maintenance and the fixed cost, but you won't get the scale, you won't get the support. If you don't have in-house experts in this field, partnering with the right team to get that is incredibly valuable. They should be covering their own costs in the value that they add. It's like going in any kind of consultancy, really.
Yeah, great. So I'm keen to understand where you think cloud hosting is all going. What is the future of cloud? What are your predictions for the future of the technology, and how do you see it evolving?
So I guess number one, it's increased adoption of serverless environments. So that means rather than, like I said, about running a fixed server the whole time, instead you're passing your code to that infrastructure environment, and it's making environments spin up and spin down as required. It's relatively new technology. It's still growing. Some of the off-the-shelf CMSs just don't support it at all. The best path to that is a completely bespoke design and build at the moment, but I see that growing a lot in the next 3 or 4 years. Then there's edge computing, as it gets called, which is distributing the delivery components of your site, the bits that are churning out the content, closer to where your customers are. using things like content distribution networks and so on to take that serverless environment I just described, but serve it from all around the world as geographically close to the customers as you possibly can. And the reason why that's good is because it reduces that round trip time from the client to the server. It gets them a faster, quicker experience. And I guess a final one, not that I want to play buzzword bingo, but it's AI and machine learning. It really is a big deal. If you don't already have exploration of machine learning in your C-suite's strategic roadmap now, you are playing catch up. It's not specifically the topic of this conversation, but cloud is such a huge enabler for machine learning that it's worth mentioning now. It's definitely a big part of the future of cloud and the reason for adoption.
Okay. So what does that mean for some of our listeners who operate within insurance industries and energy?
You need to be making sure that you have someone at the top table who is constantly on a journey to stay up to date with this technology. You know, your CIO, CTO type roles and their teams underneath them, they need to be making sure that they are choosing strategic partners who can take a holistic view across their business, that they can do integrated cloud strategies, not just how do I solve this particular campaign website's delivery, but how do we approach all delivery of all online content to our customers? How do we find the right strategic partner to take that view on it and guide us through that journey? That's probably where you want to be right now.
Okay, great. So before we move on to some questions from our listeners, I just wanted to ask one last thing. Whilst we keep our webinars conversation-led and explore the key issues, we also like to focus on the practical suggestions which can be implemented to help our viewers excel. With that in mind, what would you say are your top 3 tips for the listeners who are looking to maybe move to the cloud?
Okay, so 1, integration of development and hosting. I think one of the biggest weaknesses that we see is when you have a business select one business to do the development and one business to run the infrastructure, and they aren't talking, where there's no partnership there. You need to have this functional triangle between those roles, because it's just essential, really. Without that, you've not got your left hand talking to your right, but it's disappointingly common. 2, as I mentioned, the strategic partner selection, picking someone who can give you that holistic view of the entire business and a strategy for your entire business, rather than just focusing on one small problem domain. If you have someone who can do that, that doesn't mean you need to give them the delivery on all of those smaller projects, but what you absolutely should do is have just someone running this overarching strategy for you. Now, that could be an in-house thing, but the reality is that these technologies are moving so fast that keeping up to date with all that technology in-house is a hell of a challenge. So bringing in expertise to advise on the holistic strategy, and data strategy. This is kind of similar to what I was saying about AI and machine learning, but what is your data strategy? If you can't answer that as a business right now, you are leaving opportunity on the table. Asking yourself, what is your data strategy? Challenging yourself if you can answer it. And if you can't, finding someone to help you answer that question. That's tip number 3.
Great. Some really good, some good insights there. So questions from listeners. Sarah, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask or put to Simon?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say thank you so much, Simon and Luke. I think that was really good. I love the road analogy. I think that made it quite clear to all of us. We've all been stuck in that queue and we can't get down the road. So one of the first questions was, we understand the future of cloud hosting for our business, but what is the future of cloud hosting for customers, and what does that mean? So what if I was a customer, what would, if a website was hosted on the cloud, what would that mean for me?
As in like a final end person at home?
Exactly, yeah. I'm at home, I'm using the computer, I'm using the website. What would it mean for me?
Okay, so I guess, to pick a common example, it's things like Ticketmaster and the Glastonbury ticket queue rush and things like that. Those experiences, really, there is no excuse for that. If you're giving your customers that sort of experience, you're letting them down through a lack of good strategy on your part. You need to be thinking about those problems. And so from the final customer's perspective, they should have as seamless an experience as possible. There should be nothing in their way blocking them from making a purchase or engaging with you or whatever it needs to do that is a technological limitation. The connectivity that people have to their houses, to their phones now, removes just about every barrier on their end to doing business with you in the first place. So any barriers that exist, they are in your technology choices and what you've done to present yourself to that customer. If you're finding yourself in a situation where you have things like a website queue, you've got a problem, and you need to look at what your strategy is to address that.
Yeah, and especially when we're talking about surges of traffic, when there is, a problem happens and people go to the website because they need help. They don't want to be sitting in a queue waiting for that help. They want it to be as quick and easy as possible. So yeah, that's great. Another quick question would be, what's the best way to get started? So, I want to move to the cloud. I'm not really sure how to do it. What would you say would be the next steps for me?
Strategy. Start with strategy first. Take your business goals and get that aligned to how are we going to approach this. It's very easy to start with the doing. Start with what you're going to do. You might say, well, at the moment we're talking to each other on Skype and we're really struggling with working from home, so let's just implement Microsoft Teams with no thought into the rest of the environment around that. But the strategy needs to come first. Why do you want to solve this? What do you want to gain by it? How are you going to do it? And then the detailed design after that. How are you going to integrate that with the rest of your IT infrastructure? How are you going to make sure that you haven't got suddenly 500 different chat groups happening in Teams and creating silos of knowledge and things like that? Or if you're looking at it on the website, really getting someone with an arm's length view to come and audit what you've done. What your current environment is, looking at what they can add that challenges your preconceptions or your current design decisions.
Yes, someone who can actually give you an unbiased view and actually tell you where you should be moving on to.
Precisely. Really. Someone who doesn't have a horse in the race, who can just give you an honest opinion. I think what you need to do is focus your energies here, here, and here in order to deliver on these things that you want to do. Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Simon. Over back to you, Luke.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm sure that's a really interesting conversation for our customers to listen to.
No worries.
Did you have an event that you wanted to highlight, Simon, on the call this morning? Actually,
yes. We've got a data, I mentioned data and AI. We've got a data and AI event, a bit of an Ask Me Anything going on Friday, I want to say, but check us out on LinkedIn. All of the details are on there. So if you look up Wirehive on LinkedIn, there is a plethora of posts about how to sign up to that. But that'll be good. That's talking about all of these, the strategic angle that I've been mentioning on this call, but in reference to what is your data strategy, how are you going to approach that? And yeah,
great. Sounds interesting. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again. Bye.